Greetings, my dear little one. There is someone special I would like you to be introduced to today. Here he is. This is Flopsy. Now please refrain from sucking on his ear. Your mother has mentioned that you are still too young for stuffed animals, but I believe she might not fully grasp the situation. My thought process is that if I gift him to you now as a present, it would take a very unkind mother to take him away from you afterward. I suspect she will tuck him away until you're a bit older, but that won't really matter in the grand scheme of things. The important point is that he will belong to you. You will have formed a connection with him. At this moment, there's nothing she can do to change that bond. She has never been particularly fond of me, so I won't mind if she gets upset with me over this. It seems to come with the role of being a mother-in-law. I've already managed to anger her quite a bit when she expressed her desire for a girl instead of a boy. I told her that having a boy would actually be better. Life would have been much simpler had you been born a boy. After all, I raised all boys myself. In many ways, it was truly a blessing. Please don't take offense, my dear. Now, let me tell you about Flopsy. I have cherished him for as long as I can remember. He originally belonged to my mother before me, you see. This beloved toy has been passed down through generations, from the firstborn girl to the next firstborn girl. While he may not be the most attractive toy, your mother describes him as a mangy old thing. He has been deeply loved. You must handle him with great care because he holds a lot of significance. Speaking of my mother, what a poor soul she was. I didn't have the chance to know her well at all. She passed away when I was still quite young. She had such terrible luck towards the end of her life. She endured various health issues and unfortunate accidents. This is the reason she entrusted me with this rabbit, and now I am passing him on to you. It's believed that rabbit feet bring good fortune, and our dear Flopsy happens to have 4 of them. You must make sure not to lose him, sweetheart. It's essential that you keep him close to you at all times. Don't allow your mother to replace him or, heaven forbid, wash him. Flopsy absolutely despises getting wet. When he gets wet, he becomes very grumpy. Always remember to say your pleases and thank yous around Flopsy. Otherwise, he might think you're ungrateful and stop looking out for you. Flopsy is quite forgiving of many things, like the occasional tumble from the pram, your fleeting affection for other toys you may come to adore, or even those nights when he ends up locked away in the cupboard while a young suitor visits. But rudeness is something he cannot tolerate. And did I mention how much he dislikes water? Anyway, where was I? Water has always held a special place in my heart, especially during my younger years. However, that fondness has faded over time. My father was adamant about keeping me away from swimming. He tried to prevent me from learning how to swim altogether after the tragic incident involving my mother. Despite his efforts, I chose to ignore his warnings. It's a common phase we all go through, rebellion against authority. I understand that you will make your own choices and mistakes as well, and I won't hold that against you. In fact, I won't be around for much longer to pass any judgment on your decisions anyway. Just look at the 2 of you together. You formed such a strong bond, almost like best friends. Make sure you cherish that connection. Hold on to him tightly, just as I wish I could hold on to you, or even Flopsy for that matter. But then again, it would be selfish of me to cling to you in that way. I'm an elderly woman now, and you need him far more than I do. I have lived a fulfilling life, and I have had my share of experiences. I can't help but wonder if this is what she felt during her own struggles. Of course, I know you won't respond to me, dear child. You're still too young to grasp the depth of what I'm trying to convey. Nevertheless, it's important for me to express these thoughts. You must be aware of what lies ahead, the difficult choices that may confront you one day, if fate isn't kind. It's a choice I am grappling with right now, one that my mother faced before me. They told us that she drowned, that she drove her car into that lake. For a long time, I genuinely believed that she must have harbored some deep-seated hatred. For me, is it right to love someone even when that love causes them pain? Or should you entrust their care to someone else? It seems like it should be a straightforward decision, Yet it's anything but simple. I had hoped that perhaps our family might escape this cycle since I don't have any daughters. I thought I could break the chain, but then you came along, and after your challenging birth, there it was. A mark as clear as day, just like mine. Right here. You know, I've encountered those creatures before. When I was younger, I traveled abroad and went swimming in a lake. It was rather foolish of me, really. Flopsy couldn't save me from the shore. I saw them lurking beneath the surface. Those enormous, slimy monsters with terrible teeth. One of them grabbed my leg. Everyone insisted it was merely some pond weed, but I knew better than that. This is all part of the curse that plagues our family, I'm afraid. I lack the complete details of our family's history. It seems that one of our forebears ventured into areas they should have avoided, inadvertently disturbing something immensely powerful and possibly malevolent. However, that's not the crux of the matter at hand. What truly matters is that we bear a mark, my dear child, just as every firstborn girl in our lineage has since that fateful event. This mark serves as a beacon, drawing the attention of dark and dreadful creatures that lie in wait at the fringes of our world. These are the otherworldly beings that drift beneath the ocean's surface, lifeless yet dreaming, and those demonic entities that ultimately led to my mother's untimely demise. Oh dear me, it seems someone is in need of a diaper change. Come here, little one. We wouldn't want your mother returning just yet, would we? There we go, that's much better now. I wish I could provide you with something more meaningful before I take my leave, but I suppose I've already contributed enough in that regard. That scar on your skin, when you grow older you can conceal it with makeup if it bothers you, though truthfully I doubt it will make much difference in the end. In all honesty, I think I'm just procrastinating. Even at this moment, a part of me longs to snatch Flopsy back from your embrace and keep him close to me. It would be comforting to believe that we could both share his protection, that he could safeguard us both. It's a comforting thought, but ultimately naive. Regardless of what else he may be, Flopsy is merely a small creature. He can only look after one of us, and I would prefer that it be you. My mother and I attempted to share him for a while, although my memories from that time are hazy due to my frail health. I do recall moments spent playing with her and Flopsy in the garden during those long, sweltering summer days. I can still picture her smile, a radiant expression filled with joy and light. Her laughter would ring out, and yet the shadows would creep closer, lurking with an air of expectation and impatience. They were omnipresent that summer, infiltrating our home, waiting for us outside on the street, even invading our lungs, making us cough and struggle for each breath. They followed us relentlessly, no matter where we went. While I was somewhat shielded from the worst of it, my mother's existence had turned into an unending struggle, and it was a fight we were destined to lose. At least we couldn't win together. The allure of two marks so closely linked was simply too potent for them to ignore, regardless of any fortune that might have favored us. I can vividly recall the moment when she entered the car and drove off into the distance. She reassured me that her intention was merely to go and retrieve some medicine, assuring me that my father would be there to take care of me. She emphasized that everything would turn out fine as long as Flopsy and I stayed together. With a bulky suitcase packed full of clothes and all her savings tucked away in her purse, she set off on her own. However, she never traveled far enough to actually require either of those items. By the time the sun began to set, casting long and dark shadows, my mother had tragically passed away. So here we are. What more is there to share with you? It's important to avoid talking to strangers. Hold your loved ones close to your heart. Always heed the advice of your parents. Take good care of yourself. Make sure to eat your vegetables. And consider participating in a sport. Perhaps gymnastics could be a good fit, or maybe one of those martial arts that you often see portrayed in movies. Learn how to swim, and not just any swimming. Swim fast. When something is pursuing you, never glance back. Always remember to put the lid down after flushing the toilet. Be kind to cats. Pay no mind to what others might say about you. If it brings you comfort, don't hesitate to pray. Always maintain eye contact when speaking to people, and never under any circumstances let fear take hold of you. Not even when it comes to Flopsy. In fact, especially not him. Flopsy does speak from time to time. It's not frequent, but when he does, you must follow his instructions without question. Don't be alarmed if he isn't where you last placed him, or if some days his smile appears different, or if you notice his fur suddenly stained with blood. It's probably best not to dwell too deeply on the nature of Flopsy, my dear. At one point, I believed that my parents had fabricated the entire story, convincing me that Flopsy was merely a stuffed toy and that I was simply a child with an overly active imagination and vivid nightmares. However, after experiencing the consequences of leaving Flopsy behind, I came to the conclusion that he must be some sort of lucky charm, perhaps an enchanted doll filled with ancient magic designed to keep me safe. In a way, he resembled a Poppet, if you will. Yet now, even that notion feels incorrect, considering that Flopsy seems to possess a life of his own. It's possible that he is inhabited by some protective spirit, or perhaps he embodies a trickster god, taking on the form of a woolen creature. I found myself pondering the question of where I might be able to locate a cassette player. It had been quite some time since I had last owned one, and the thought of using such a device felt nostalgic. To my astonishment, I stumbled upon a sealed envelope tucked away in my parents' safe deposit box. This discovery was unexpected, to say the least. The envelope was positioned all the way at the back of the box, and it had remained unopened since it was placed there over 3 decades ago. Inside this envelope were cassette tapes that bore no labels, except for a simple numbering system, indicating they were numbered 1 through 3. My curiosity was piqued. I absolutely needed to uncover what secrets these tapes held. Throughout my life, my parents always seemed to associate with individuals whose backgrounds raised eyebrows and prompted questions. Therefore, when they passed away under mysterious circumstances, I couldn't say I was entirely shocked. After completing high school, I made a conscious effort to distance myself from them to a certain extent, although I never completely cut ties. Their involvement with various secret societies did not captivate my interest, but it certainly attracted the attention of those groups, as my parents were both accomplished in their professional lives and financially stable. In fact, I hold certain members of one of those societies partially responsible for their tragic end, particularly after my parents decided to withdraw financial support for specific group activities. However, I acknowledge that my suspicions lack concrete evidence. My aspiration to enroll in a prominent university on the West Coast was driven more by my desire to escape New York, the place where I had spent my formative years, than by any genuine ambition to earn a degree from that particular institution. Additionally, as the Beach Boys often sang about, the allure of California girls added to my motivation for relocating. I took my time pursuing my degree, stretching the process over 7 years. This extended timeline was primarily due to my lack of a clear academic focus that genuinely sparked my interest, coupled with my contentment in living off my parents' financial support without feeling the immediate need to secure employment. During the early 1990s, I found the rave culture, characterized by the use of MDMA, commonly known as ecstasy, and a neo-hippie ethos, fascinating. For several months, I actively sought out the ever-changing locations of these vibrant parties, hoping to discover something within myself that I had yet to uncover. During this period of my life, I came to a significant realization. The wild, drug-fueled parties I had been attending were not going to provide me with the answers I was desperately searching for. However, living in California meant that I had a plethora of alternative avenues available to explore in my quest for understanding and enlightenment. As I navigated through various philosophies and practices, such as transcendental meditation and hatha yoga, I began to develop a deeper appreciation for my parents and their involvement in numerous spiritual groups. It became clear to me that they shared an insatiable thirst for truth and knowledge, which I had previously overlooked. During the Christmas season of my final year at university, I made the decision to spend some quality time with my parents. My intention was to express my desire to travel around the world before committing myself to a specific career path. I had already set my sights on a profession in information technology, so it could be said that I had discovered my calling in that field. My parents invited me to attend a seasonal gathering hosted by one of the organizations they were involved with, and I agreed to go along. The prospect of mingling with some of the world's most influential figures in the occult, coupled with an impressive selection of alcoholic beverages, seemed like it would make for an entertaining evening. Little did I realize just how impactful that night would turn out to be. Upon our arrival at the lavish mansion owned by one of the organization's members, I indulged in a few glasses of exquisite bourbon, which gave me a sense of confidence. Feeling emboldened, I decided to venture upstairs to discover what kinds of activities were taking place on the second floor of the mansion. The initial rooms I explored were relatively benign, featuring sleight-of-hand illusionists and fortune-tellers, many of whom were dressed in traditional gypsy attire. It appeared that these elite individuals enjoyed the same kind of carnival-style magic that ordinary people do. However, as I moved into the next room, I encountered something much more intriguing. A group of people was gathering around a round table that had clearly been prepared for a seance. Curious about the proceedings, I asked if there was space for one more participant. To my delight, I was informed that they were indeed looking for another person to join, so I took my seat at the table. I found myself positioned between an elderly woman and a man who looked to be in his mid-30s, just as the medium assumed her position at the head of the table and the lights above us dimmed, setting the stage for what was to come. The medium began by stating that she sensed there were 7 individuals in the room who had previously participated in a seance, while 5 others had not. She then requested those who had prior experience to raise their hands. As she had anticipated, 7 hands went up in response. "Excellent," she remarked, noting that the group seemed to be in harmony with one another. With a playful grin, she introduced herself as Emma Scott, but encouraged everyone to call her Cora. This prompted several members of the audience to chuckle knowingly, as if they shared an inside joke. Continuing in the traditional manner of conducting a seance, Cora asked the participants if there was anyone among the deceased whom they wished to communicate with. After gathering this information, she entered a trance-like state, which allowed her to channel the spirits and facilitate a dialogue between them and the living attendees. I found her performance to be quite captivating, and it appeared that those who engaged with her were genuinely convinced by the responses she provided. However, the atmosphere shifted dramatically when a look of fear suddenly crossed Cora's face. In a trembling voice, she declared that one person in the group was experiencing possession. "I'm afraid we must conclude this session immediately," she insisted, "as we cannot permit the malevolent spirit to cross over from the other side." A murmur of disappointment rippled through the crowd at the sudden termination of the seance, but most exited the room quietly, casting furtive glances at one another as they tried to identify who among them might be the afflicted individual. Cora stood up, her expression revealing both fatigue and concern, before disappearing behind the curtains from which she had initially emerged at the far end of the room, opposite the main entrance. I too got to my feet, feeling inexplicably unsettled by what I perceived as a display of trickery. It seemed like the perfect moment for me to retreat to the bar and continue my exploration of the exquisite bourbons available. The remainder of the evening passed without any further incidents. Before long, my parents reappeared from wherever they had been, collected me from the bar, and together we joyfully made our way home. As Christmas came and went, I returned to the university, looking forward to a year-long sabbatical that would allow me some time before I needed to embark on my career path. After embarking on numerous adventures across the globe, which could fill volumes with untold tales, I eventually found myself settling into a more conventional lifestyle, much like many others around me. This new chapter of my life included starting my own business, entering into marriage, welcoming a child into the world, and ultimately experiencing the dissolution of that marriage, an all too common narrative shared by countless individuals in my circle. Unlike my parents, who had a deep fascination with the occult, I never cultivated an interest in those mystical pursuits. As a result, our relationship remained sincere and genuine, though it lacked a certain warmth and emotional depth. We often gathered to celebrate holidays together, whether in bustling New York City, the vibrant atmosphere of San Francisco where I lived, or in various exotic locations around the globe, cherishing the moments we spent as a family. Once my parents retired, they frequently embarked on extensive archaeological expeditions, vanishing for long stretches of time as they sought out ancient artifacts hidden away in remote deserts and dense forests. They would often lose themselves in the labyrinthine aisles of dusty old bookstores located in quaint towns that were rarely frequented by tourists. However, the news of their disappearance came as a profound shock to me. It was reported that they vanished without a trace while climbing a mountain in pursuit of a particularly intriguing item that held great significance within the realm of the occult. With no physical remains to mourn, empty coffins were placed in our family mausoleum as a somber gesture. A multitude of lawyers was engaged to help navigate the legal complexities that arose from their sudden absence. Ultimately, as the sole heir, I found myself in possession of an inheritance substantial enough to afford me the luxury of retiring at the relatively young age of 45. There were numerous tasks that required my attention during this transitional period, prompting me to sell my company to my closest friend and business partner. In addition, I began the painstaking process of sifting through the archives that chronicled my parents' lives. This brings me back to the original question that sparked my thoughts. Where could I possibly locate a cassette deck capable of playing? The tapes I discovered tucked away in a sealed envelope inside a safe deposit box that had gone untouched for years, but was still paid for through 2030? The solution presented itself in the form of a pawn shop. These establishments are treasure troves for anyone seeking out items that are old, unique, or simply hard to find. I ended up purchasing the tape deck, likely for a price that far exceeded its actual worth, but I was eager to hear what secrets the tapes might hold. Once I returned home, I settled in with a glass, or perhaps two, of wine, ready to immerse myself in the contents of the tapes. Looking back, if only I had known then what I know now, I might have opted for a bottle, or even two, of vodka instead. The tape begins with a crackling sound, and the first words that emerge are, "His name is David," spoken by my mother's voice. An unfamiliar voice then poses a question, asking if David is the focus of today's discussion. "That is correct," my father's voice confirms, indicating the seriousness of the situation by stating, "He is in dire need of help." The unknown voice responds with skepticism, questioning what leads them to believe that my assistance is required. My mother, her voice trembling with emotion, urges, "Just speak with him, and you will understand why." Then I hear my own voice, albeit distorted and shaky due to the damage on the cassette, saying, "David, my name, here to help you if I can." In the background, there are low, guttural noises that seem to resonate with a sinister undertone. Suddenly, I gasp, recognizing the voice. "David, is that you?" The response is chilling. A diabolical laughter fills the air, sending shivers down my spine. "I told you that you'd know why," my mother whispers desperately, her tone laced with fear. Amidst the chaos, a voice declares defiantly, "I defy your worthless god." At this point, I feel compelled to turn off the machine. The sounds I am hearing are overwhelming. I realize that I was possessed as a young child, yet I have no recollection of those events. Seeking solace, I take a large gulp of wine before mustering the courage to turn the cassette player back on. With a click, the tape resumes. "I wish to speak to David, not you, demon," the unknown voice asserts firmly. The guttural voice, which I suspect is coming from my own childhood self, retorts, "David has been consumed by me now, weakling." In the background, I can hear my mother, beginning to cry uncontrollably while my father tries to comfort her, his voice filled with concern. It is time to start an exorcism, someone states, emphasizing the urgency of the situation. The words of your God are worthless against me, the demon taunts, its voice dripping with malice. Loud weeping echoes through the recording, heightening the sense of despair. The unknown voice, likely a priest, starts reciting the rites of an exorcism. But their solemn words are interrupted by fits of demonic laughter and profane outbursts. What I've just described is merely the first side of the initial tape. It seems that this exorcism ordeal stretched over 3 grueling days, as the demon that had taken hold of me was particularly formidable. I find myself uncertain about how I became possessed in the first place. However, I suspect that my parents' involvement in various rituals associated with their secret societies may have inadvertently triggered it. The past few days since I listened to the tapes have been incredibly challenging. I now recall why I have always steered clear of occult and paranormal subjects. I am left questioning whether it is the excessive amounts of alcohol, barbiturates, and marijuana that I have been consuming that are fueling my paranoia, or if I'm genuinely hearing voices that are once again trying to seize control of my body. Perhaps the substances I indulge in are demons in their own right. Regardless of the cause, I am in desperate need of assistance. The voices are growing increasingly out, and I fear I cannot endure this much longer. Please, I implore you, help me. Step forward, commanded the elderly woman in a voice that sounded weak and frail. She occupied a grand throne, her hunched and frail form almost disappearing within the luxurious gown and ornate robes that had once fit her perfectly. A heavy crown rested upon her head, pressing down on her forehead. Come stand before me, granddaughter. Listen to what I have to say and follow my instructions. The young girl felt a wave of fear wash over her, causing her to tremble slightly, but she began to move forward, taking slow, hesitant steps until she stood directly in front of Queen Valda. With her hands clasped together in front of her, she bowed with an elegance that belied her anxiety. She lacked the bravery to meet the Queen's gaze. Vanessa, you are still so young and inexperienced, the Queen began, her voice rough and gravelly. She spoke deliberately, frequently pausing to wheeze as she struggled for breath. Only 15 summers have passed since you entered this world. You might believe that I have taught you nothing, leading you to feel unprepared for the responsibilities of ruling. But that is of little consequence. After a brief cough, she cleared her throat and continued, Rylaria will be entrusted to you when my time on this earth comes to an end. The recent passing of your parents has made it inevitable. At this revelation, young Vanessa could no longer hold back her tears. A queen does not weep, child, Valda snapped sharply. The courtiers and nobles present exchanged sympathetic whispers about the princess, aware of the queen's notorious cruelty. It was common knowledge that many of her subjects held deep resentment towards her. Valda was certain that her death would bring joy to the kingdom. After casting a venomous glare at her court members, she continued, This is not the moment for indulgent emotions, she gasped, clutching her hand to her chest as she struggled to breathe. Your parents are gone now. You represent the future. Do not show fear, or your adversaries will take advantage of your weakness. It is crucial that you follow my every command and absorb my wisdom. I have ruled longer than anyone else. A harsh laugh escaped her lips, which quickly turned into a fit of wheezing and coughing. Soon enough, the kingdom will welcome a new ruler, a beautiful young girl with an entire lifetime ahead of her. For a brief moment, silence enveloped the room, broken only by the queen's labored breaths. Her uncontrollable coughing shook her frail body violently. Unnoticed from her court, a solitary tear traced its way down her cheek. She longed for the suffering to cease, for her body had endured far too much. The joy of life had vanished, leaving her golden years filled solely with pain and despair. Climb the stairs and stand at my side, girl, she commanded after taking a moment to catch her breath. I have something special for you. The princess, feeling a mix of apprehension and curiosity, slowly ascended the steps leading to the dais, until she reached her grandmother's throne. Once she was beside the queen, the older woman retrieved a small straw doll from within the folds of her robes. She placed it gently across her lap and began to tenderly stroke its straw hair with her gnarled fingers, which were marked by age and hardship. As Vanessa reached out to grasp the doll resting on the queen's lap, her hand was met with a sudden and harsh slap that stung cruelly. The sharp crack of the impact reverberated throughout the hall, causing a murmur of discontent to ripple through the gathered crowd, who watched the scene unfold with bated breath. The queen shot a fierce glare at her subjects, who were lurking in the shadows of the grand room. In a fit of rage, she attempted to raise her voice above the whispers, exclaiming, "Silence, you impotent dogs! If my actions disturb you so greatly, then draw your daggers and come forth to slay me." She paused dramatically, coughing slightly as she awaited any response to her bold challenge. However, no one dared to speak up. Instead, the men and women present shrank further into the darkness, avoiding her piercing gaze. "I thought as much. From you gutless, groveling swine," she spat, her disdain palpable. Redirecting her focus back to her granddaughter, who was still nursing the painful welt on her hand, the queen lowered her voice, softening her tone just slightly. "This gift is not meant for your hands right now, girl, but soon it will be. It shall remain here on my lap until I pass away. After that, you alone will inherit the doll. You must hold it tightly and ensure that no harm comes to it. Do you understand?" "Girl!" The princess nodded obediently, still too frightened to meet her grandmother's intense gaze directly. "Let me share a little story with you," the queen began, her voice now softer and more reflective. "This doll has been a cherished heirloom passed down through generations of our family. For hundreds of years, it has moved from granddaughter to granddaughter. According to legend, the very first woman who crafted this doll and bestowed it upon our family was a witch." As she spoke, she gripped her robes tightly with her left hand while holding the doll securely in her right, bracing herself as if anticipating a wave of pain. "Silly, isn't it?" she added, a hint of irony lacing her words. The princess listened intently, nodding silently as she absorbed her grandmother's tale, the weight of their family's history settling heavily upon her young shoulders. "I must confess that I hold a certain affection for you, Vanessa. Over time, I have developed a bond with you that runs deep. My connection to your mother is even stronger, as I had the privilege of knowing her for a much longer period. It saddens me greatly that she is no longer with us. However, what truly matters at this moment is that you take good care of the doll. It is crucial that it remains within our family. Otherwise, we may face dire consequences. This doll possesses the ability to bestow upon you the wisdom necessary for leadership. I have complete faith that you will thrive when I am no longer here in this world. I am confident that you will become an exceptional queen, just as I have been. As you settle down tonight, hold the doll close to your heart and remember your mother fondly. It will provide you with solace during this difficult..." To me, the queen's voice trailed off as she spoke, and she instinctively clutched her chest before exhaling a heavy sigh. That sigh would mark her final breath. After a sufficient amount of time had elapsed, and the individuals present in the throne room were convinced that the queen had passed away, a wave of relief washed over them, leading to a spontaneous celebration. Just before her attendants could begin to remove the lifeless body of the queen, the princess reached out and swiftly grabbed the straw doll from her grandmother's lap. The young girl, whose gaze was fixed on the ground, failed to notice the ethereal wisp that escaped from the queen's mouth in her last moments of life. Unbeknownst to her, the almost invisible swirling mist vanished into the straw head of the ancient heirloom. Clutching the doll tightly, she was escorted out of the room. Later that evening, in Vanessa's private chambers, the servants gently tucked her into bed, planting soft kisses on her cheeks and wrapping their arms around her in a warm embrace. To celebrate the occasion, they reassured her that the following day would herald a bright new beginning for both her and the kingdom of Rylaria. As she drifted off to sleep, she held the little straw doll close, dreaming of joyful moments from the past. In the stillness of the night, the ghostly green wisp quietly slipped out of the doll and entered the mouth of the slumbering princess. Valda slowly opened her eyes, awakening to a world that felt refreshingly different. The first sensation that registered in her mind was the invigoratingly crisp and clean air filling her lungs, a stark contrast to the suffocating pain she had often endured with each breath in her previous life. With a burst of energy, she sprang out of bed, eager to see her reflection in the standing mirror that awaited her. Taking another deep breath, she felt a wave of joy wash over her, prompting a bright smile to spread across her face. In a moment of pure delight, she twirled in front of the mirror, laughter bubbling up as she embraced the vibrant youth and beauty she had recently acquired. Feeling an immense sense of relief that the transference process had been successful once more, Valda flung open the shutters of her window. She gazed down at the sprawling kingdom that she would continue to govern with an iron fist. A fierce determination surged within her as she silently vowed that those who had dared to speak ill of her would come to regret their words. She could hardly contain her anticipation at the thought of hearing what the loyal subjects would say about the former queen now that she had taken on this new identity. Returning her focus to the mirror, she found herself giggling, captivated by her own reflection, as she marveled at the transformation of her being. However, the act of transitioning from one life to another was not without its share of bittersweet reflections. A fleeting thought crossed her mind about what her granddaughter might have achieved had she been given the chance to live her life. Despite this moment of sorrow, Valda quickly pushed it aside, choosing instead to focus on the present. She had developed a deep affection for her daughter, yet the allure of inhabiting her granddaughter's youthful body was too enticing to resist. It was far easier to persuade the young to cling tightly to the doll after all. At the age of 15, her granddaughter was certainly old enough to rule, and those who underestimated her due to her youth would soon find themselves regretting their miscalculations. After all, Valda was 732 years old, possessing a wealth of knowledge and experience when it came to navigating the treacherous waters of power and dealing with adversaries. Embracing the thrill of starting anew always filled her with excitement and joy. As she continued to gaze into the mirror, a satisfied smile graced her lips. With her newfound youth, attracting suitors would be a breeze, and the prospect of bearing children seemed entirely feasible. If fate allowed her to live long enough, and if she began the process soon, perhaps she would even have the opportunity to pass the cherished doll down to a great-granddaughter this time around. Life felt promising once again, and with a renewed sense of purpose, she hurried off to embark on her day as the newly crowned queen, ready to reclaim her throne and assert her dominance over her realm. The door swung open with a sudden force. Jamie burst into the room, his movements frantic as he began to rummage through all the drawers in a hurried manner. His search came to a halt when he reached the bottom drawer, where he quickly grabbed a pocket knife, clutching it tightly against his chest as if it were a precious treasure. With deliberate slowness, he made his way over to his bed, his focus entirely consumed by the knife. He traced the name Dominic, which had been hastily written on the blade with a permanent marker, his fingers gliding over the letters. As he settled down onto the bed, his gaze remained fixed on the object he held in his hand, as if it were the only thing that mattered in that moment. At the foot of his younger brother's bed, Dom sat quietly, observing the scene unfold before him. He too found himself unable to divert his attention from the pocket knife that Jamie was so intently focused on. This particular knife had once been his own. It was a possession he had cherished since his early days in primary school. In fact, he often referred to it as a toy, though it held far more significance than any ordinary plaything. A deep sigh escaped his lips as he reflected on its importance. However, a pocket knife was not just like any other toy one might find lying around. It was a genuine tool, crafted to perform a multitude of tasks, compact yet powerful in its design. Unlike typical toys that could easily break if handled too roughly or tossed carelessly across the room, This knife was resilient and dependable. It didn't belittle its owner for being too young or inexperienced. Perhaps this was the reason why it earned the affectionate nickname of the trusty old pocket knife. Dom had relied on it to navigate through the various challenges and messes that life presented to him. It was people who had told him time and again that he was selfish, that he acted solely for his own benefit, showing little regard for his younger brother's well-being. They claimed to understand him so well that they believed anything he said in response would be nothing but deceitful words, asserting that no one should ever take him seriously again. Frustrated by their judgments, he had turned away from them, retreating to the solitude of his room where he confided in the knife. The knife never mocked him, it simply listened. Even when he felt overwhelmed with anger and slammed the bottle opener tool onto the table, leaving a noticeable dent behind, the knife remained unfazed. It didn't judge its owner based on perceived shortcomings or weaknesses. It was there, for Dom alone, regardless of what others thought about him. Or perhaps it was more accurate to say that those people didn't truly consider him at all. Their thoughts were occupied with other familiar faces, individuals who visited regularly, to exchange polite greetings and make subtle remarks while scrutinizing every aspect of their lives. These outsiders were so courteous, yet their politeness felt insincere, creating an atmosphere of fear among Dom's family. They constantly worried about the potential negative interpretations of everyday occurrences, always bracing themselves for the worst possible outcomes in life. When Dom fell silent, the humans interpreted his quietness as a sign of rudeness towards them. They believed that their kindness had led him to assume he could behave impolitely. As Dom and Jamie exchanged smiles more frequently, the humans grew suspicious, thinking that the children were concealing something from them. They perceived this behavior as a lack of respect, feeling frustrated that they were not privy to everything happening in their children's minds. Dom found it almost amusing when they scolded him about it. Yes, they were indeed hiding something, but what they were concealing was their shared struggle and their efforts to uplift one another's spirits. It was ironic how exasperating the situation became. The humans consistently misinterpreted the signs and did so with an air of desperation. Their unpredictability was astounding, yet they expected Dom and Jamie to decipher exactly what kind of reactions they desired from them. It was utterly absurd. Jamie held up the pocket knife in front of his face and blew on it, which snapped Dom back to reality. A small cloud of dust floated away as he did so. Dom blinked, recalling that dust no longer irritated his eyes. However, a twinge of sadness washed over him when he noticed that Jamie was staring directly in his direction, yet their gazes did not connect. Gradually, Dom edged closer, hoping that his brother would sense his presence. Unfortunately, Jamie showed no indication of awareness. Dom shrugged off the disappointment. It was fine, he had no grounds for complaint regarding the situation. He gently ran his fingers over the knife in Jamie's hand. Although it had accumulated some dust after 8 years of absence, it remained fundamentally unchanged. This was the same trusty companion that had been with him during the most uneventful months of his life. The days seemed to fly by in a disorienting haze, as if time itself was slipping away unnoticed. The sky flickered like a faulty light bulb, switching on and off in rhythm with the biting sarcasm and unwelcome physical interactions that surrounded him. Dom found himself forcibly thrust into a chaotic maelstrom of harsh voices and jarring sounds. To cope with this overwhelming environment, he had constructed an imaginary box in the air around him, an invisible barrier through which no sound, sensation, or warmth could penetrate. As the shouting grew louder and the physical contact more aggressive, Dom instinctively shrank the dimensions of his protective box, tightening it around himself until even Jamie, who was once a source of comfort, could no longer reach him. Each additional word he felt compelled to utter drained him of energy, leaving him with a stark choice: either formulate a response or simply continue to exist. For hours on end, he would sit on the cold floor, alone with his thoughts, and the knife that resided within his mental fortress fixated on the blank wall before him. Deep down, He understood that this behavior was unhealthy, that he was sinking deeper into an abyss of despair, but the fear of external stimuli kept him trapped inside his self-imposed isolation. Only the knife, a symbol of his pain, truly understood him and accepted him for who he was. Dom was indifferent to the fact that each passing day made the confines of his box feel increasingly frigid, nor did he acknowledge the way the weight of emptiness pressed heavily against his chest, causing him discomfort. This suffocating sensation was preferable to enduring the torment of others, vocalizing every flaw and insecurity he possessed, forcing him to confront how repulsive and hopeless he felt about himself. As time progressed, he came to the unsettling realization that he no longer wished to wake up each morning. However, he never anticipated that the moment of reckoning would arrive so abruptly. One particular evening, it felt as though even his mental sanctuary could no longer contain the explosive fragments of hurtful words that threatened to break free. Dom distinctly remembered holding his breath, trying to maintain control for as long as possible, until suddenly, the box transformed into an impenetrable steel structure, solid, powerful, and overwhelmingly heavy. In a moment of desperation, he bolted out into the darkened streets, directionless and lost. All he could recall was the throbbing pain in his temples, a result of clenching his jaw tightly in anxiety. Did he catch a glimpse of the headlights approaching? Perhaps. Did he make any effort to dodge them? Maybe not. But at this point, such details felt trivial. Eventually, the inevitable would occur, and Dom preferred that there be a less agonizing memory for Jamie to hold on to when he thought of him. Had he chosen to remain where he was, allowing the box to suffocate him and sever the strings of his existence, he might have spiraled into madness and taken drastic measures. Such actions would undoubtedly leave a far more profound scar on his brother's heart. What was truly significant in this moment was the overwhelming fear that Dom felt. Jamie was acutely aware of the significance that the knife had held for them in the past. During the earlier times when Dom still managed to articulate his thoughts a bit, Jamie would often bring him the knife whenever he noticed that Dom appeared anxious or distressed. Now, however, Jamie had rushed in search of that very knife. For the entirety of 8 long years, even while grappling with the grief of losing Dom, Jamie had never once sought out the pocket knife. Although Dom was no longer alive, he wasn't naive enough to think that Jamie's frantic search for the knife was without purpose. "Bro, I know you're there," Jamie's quivering voice called out into the void. Dom felt a tightening sensation in his chest. He desperately wished he could respond to his brother's call, and I think you probably guessed it already. At that moment, Dom's heart plummeted. "I'm scared. I'm lonely. They don't understand me, and all they see are the negative aspects of everything." If Dom had the ability to shed tears, he would have done so in that moment. He yearned to plead with any presence, any being that might listen. "Please don't let Jamie follow the same path I did. Now I understand why you only spoke to the knife. It was the only thing that felt safe. The knife was the one object that wouldn't inflict pain upon you. Unlike everyone else, even me. No, please don't do this. I assure you that the knife isn't your only sanctuary. There are people who care about you. Please reach out to someone. Don't retreat into yourself. It's suffocating. Bro, do you want to know where things went wrong for you?" Dom was fully aware that Jamie couldn't hear his silent thoughts, but he fell silent nonetheless. "You built walls around yourself by isolating away from others. You withdrew so much that you likely missed hearing most of the cruel remarks directed at you. But your refuge became that knife. Despite how much you confided in it, deep down, you knew that it couldn't truly represent you. It couldn't reciprocate your feelings. It was lifeless." As Jamie wiped the tears from his face, he turned his gaze toward the ceiling. "I don't hold it against you. It's not like you could have communicated with me back then. After all, I was just a child of 8. Jamie manipulated the knife, flipping it back and forth in his hands. "And now there's nothing we can change about the past, right?" He forced out a laugh, which was followed by a breath that sounded painfully strained. Dom vividly recalled the discomfort of tears mingling with the air in his lungs. It was an unpleasant experience. But don't worry, I refuse to follow in your footsteps. I have my own safe haven, and although he is also gone, Jamie's voice trembled. I know he loves me in return. When I came rushing in for the knife, I wasn't searching for it. You were actually looking for me. I had been searching for you. You know, I find myself uncertain about whether you are consistently present, if you only visit occasionally, or perhaps if you ever come at all. Nevertheless, I choose to believe that whenever I grasp the knife, it will signal your arrival for a comforting embrace or some form of connection. Jamie let out a deep sigh. He focused his gaze on the knife for a few moments before carefully sliding it beneath his pillow. With a heavy heart, he shut his eyes, allowing tears to flow freely down his cheeks in an erratic pattern. I guess I can keep the knife. Jamie murmured softly. Dom responded with a gentle smile. As Jamie began to drift into slumber, the pocket knife tucked under his pillow emitted a faint glow. One side bore Dom's name, written in bold permanent marker, while the opposite side now featured Jamie's name, intricately carved into the wood. It belonged to him now. I am always here, watching over you. I will always be ready to listen. While you may not physically sense my embrace, I hope you can feel the depth of my love. For you. In that moment, Dom felt a tear escape down his cheek, as if such emotions were still within his reach. You can indeed have the knife.